Ben, I loved watching you get into that, man. That was great. Um, it's such an appropriate tune too, because I mean, we look around the world, even though it was written as kind of an observation of police brutality initially, and then when Marvin Gaye got it as a draft, because the who was it? It was a Motown group that had originally kind of drafted it and then gave it to Marvin Gaye because they wouldn't record it, and so he added his own very personal take on it, and he was thinking about the Vietnam War at the time, and I guess it came out in '71 or '2, but it seems to resonate again and again because we look around at the world and there's so much happening and so many bad things happening that we can hear those words. What's going on as a sort of a response, as a cry to the pain and the suffering and the division and all the stuff that we see tearing people apart today. And here we come into this beautiful space and we hear this incredible musical conversation as these four fine musicians talk with one another and communicate back and forth. And their conversation is this beautiful thing that we get to be a part of. We get to hear it, we get to respond, and this is us. As I thought about what to say tonight, I thought about our Obadiah series. So I'm quite proudly wearing my Obadiah t-shirt. I think, Chris, more pastors should get a t-shirt made when you're doing a sermon series. This is my first one for a sermon series. But as I was thinking about that, because I've been spending a lot of time in this short little book of Obadiah. It's in the Old Testament. It's one of the minor prophets. So it's very short. There are 12 minor prophets, 4 of these major prophets, the major ones, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, and Isaiah. But then the 12 minor prophets, and Obadiah is the shortest of those. There's 21 verses, 18 of them are poetry, and so we just ignore it. And so it's a story for another time how we as a church ended up with a 4-part series on these 21 verses. But as I've been spending more and more time with it this month, I realize there's so much that it has to say to us today. The premise of the book is the ancient Israelites had this relationship with the Edomites. They both the Israelites came from Jacob, and the Edomites came from Esau. They were twin brothers and kind of fought from the start. And then going forward, their descendants, the Israelites and the Edomites, never got along. And when the Babylonians invaded in about 587 or so BC, before the Common Era, the Edomites stood by. And Obadiah's prophecy is largely a response to the Edomites watching it take place, watching it unfold. And Marvin Gaye's song is a response in 2 parts. The original authors, and their names have escaped me, but the original 2 that were drafting it were watching the riots, I think the Watts riots in California, and they saw the police brutality. That's where we get the line about the brutality. And then when they gave it to Marvin, he took it and applied it to the Vietnam War. But fast forward to today, there's so many things that we see as bystanders. We see from the sidelines. And to this, Obadiah is saying there is no space for being a bystander. Being a bystander is being complicit in the wrong. Being a bystander, seeing something going wrong, seeing somebody hurt, seeing somebody suffering, seeing somebody fall, and not doing anything makes us part of the problem. But Obadiah doesn't end with that. It ends with hope, because there's a God that will make all things right. There is a God who craves justice and lifts up the oppressed, the downtrodden, and the poor and the suffering. And so the final song that Carlia is going to share in just a moment is one that is based in Psalm 23. It still is. Okay, good. we're doing jazz. She could have called an audible, or the Holy Spirit could have led her to go in a different direction. In jazz and in church, either can happen. And so, but as is the plan, in just a moment you're going to hear her sing a song that's based in Psalm 23, which takes this hope of Obadiah, this assurance that God is a God of the oppressed, a God of those who are suffering, a God who is on the side of those who need help. And the 23rd Psalm gives us the assurance that God is here, God is with us, God is present. So, when we gather in this space and we hear this musical conversation, we witness new things happening. And even though it is fresh and new every time, and if you came early and you heard them warming up and you heard the same tune again a little later, it is new because they're recreating it and reforming and renewing it every time. Even though it's new, we see that newness and that change alongside the consistency of a God who holds us in his everlasting arms. So let us listen now as we hear that word of assurance in a God in whom we can trust. Carly?